something different. Kodak Retina Ia sent to me, said that the focus is very stiff, or it's extremely stiff. It feels very unpleasant indeed. The film Advance is very stiff at the end of its movement. The frame count is working, but it's very, very stiff. Something not correct there. I suspect it's incorrectly timed with the shutter at the front, but we shall find out. So, this is a fairly uncommon Retina Ia. You don't see many with the Kodak Ektar lens. More commonly you see them with the Schneider Zenar lens. Otherwise it'll be very similar to the run-of-the-mill Retina Ia cameras. Just check to make sure there's no film in there before I open it up. That all looks good. And I will start by removing the shutter. Alright, with the shutter removed from the body, is there any change in the action of the film Advance? Well, yes there is. Film Advance works smoothly, no problem at all now, so I'm quite confident that there is indeed a problem to do with the timing of the shutter and the body, was what was making that film Advance very stiff. Now the focus. Let's have a look at the focus. What can we say about this? Well, I'll just remove a part here. I'll remove this ring on the front. That just serves as a shutter mount to stop the shutter rotating on this model. On the rangefinder equipped camera, the Retina Ia, this component also has an arm which couples to the rangefinder. Not so on the Retina Ia, because of course it has no rangefinder. We'll take that component off. And this gives me access to the focus scale ring. You can see it here. I'll zoom you in a bit. Now here, what can I see? Well, that screw looks quite normal. This screw, I can only see part of the head. In other words, the screw is underneath the edge of the focus scale ring. Similarly here and similarly here. So the focus scale ring is only held to the outer helical by one single screw. In fact, it lifts off completely. The other thing about this camera, I was told that it has loose parts. Well, what's the loose part? Well, it's this focus scale ring button here, and the head on that screw is only half present. So that screw is broken and needs replacing. I'll remove these screws and see if the focus helical is actually quite stiff. I expect it is. I imagine that the grease has dried out. And typically what happens is that the grease dries out, goes very stiff. The focus scale ring is reluctant to move, and when forced, it pops off over the top of the screws holding it in position. And of course, once it pops off, it won't just pop back again. So I'll just span these screw holes with my tweezers and check the focus. Check the action. It's stiff and quite lumpy, but that wouldn't account for the scale ring being loose. Looking at that, I would say that something else has happened here. Given that we've got a broken screw on the control knob at this point, I would think that it's more likely that the problem here wasn't caused simply by dried out grease, but that this had been pulled up. It's been dropped and this has hit the ground, and it has done two things. It's broken the screw and it's popped this thing off its mount. I think that's the most likely cause, is that the camera's been dropped. This has hit the ground and damaged it, broken its screw and lifted this thing off its mechanism. The alternative is that this was damaged the other way, that a thumb or something else has got behind here and pulled on it, and that has broken the screw holding the knob and also lifted the ring off over those screws. Either way, I don't see any great complications. So what do I have in front of me? Well, I have a camera here. The shutter appears to work, so I'm quite confident that with a clean that'll work even better. We have a focus scale ring with a focus helical does move. It's stiff and it's dirty and it's lumpy, but it moves, so I'm quite confident that once cleaned and re-lubricated that'll be as good as gold. The focus scale ring here, I'm quite confident that once that's put back in place that'll hold well. I can see a little divot here where the screw head is pulled past there. I'll just push that back down into place. And of course our control knob here needs a new screw, so that'll have to be replaced. But it looks like a nice straightforward job for me, and I could do with a straightforward job because I've had a string of terrible ones. Thanks for watching. What was it I was just saying about this being probably a nice straightforward job? Well, it was until I started opening up the shutter, and it was very hard getting the lens unscrewed, the front group of the lens. That was just very hard to get loose. In fact, it was just about impossible to get loose, so I used cunning techniques known only to me to get in from behind and put a bit of solvent in around the threads of that thing, and I was able to get the thing loose eventually. And then I've opened up the shutter, and it's obviously been flooded. It's obviously been wet at some stage. There's a fair bit of corrosion staining in there. I don't know whether that shows up particularly well on the camera. You can certainly see it there. So it's a bit of a dog's breakfast. I know someone's serviced this before and done a bad job of it, because the flash contact post here, there's supposed to be a tiny little black plastic insulating slug which stops the screw from biting directly onto the contact, and that was missing. So I know the flash didn't work for a start due to poor repair work. But I'm going to have to work my way through all of these somewhat stained and grubby looking parts to rescue what can be rescued and work out what I'm replacing. The diaphragm blades are particularly worrying because, as you can probably see here, they are of that weird design where they are very thin in cross section across the middle, and I'm going to have to polish those with Brasso to remove any corrosion marks from them. It means that they are that much more vulnerable to damage if my cotton bud or my cleaning cloth catches on them. There's much more opportunity to damage them. And look at that retaining plate there. That's the diaphragm side of the retaining plate, and you can see that's pretty bloody ugly. So that's a great disappointment to me. I was looking forward to a nice easy job. The body components, as I've cleaned them up, they've all looked pretty good. The exception being the top cover, and it was obvious that water and corrosion problems inside the viewfinder glass area. They cleaned up okay, but I wasn't expecting to find this mess inside the shutter, that's for sure. Well, I'm working my way through this shutter. I've got the outer case cleaned. I've removed any loose corrosion, cleaned it up quite well really. I've polished the diaphragm blades, and I hate polishing diaphragm blades because they're very easy to damage, but the diaphragm looks good and it's working very smooth. I have the mechanism plate cleaned, that's all working well. I have the blade actuating ring in there, that's all working nice and snappy. One odd thing there was an extra washer. And the extra washer was in the underneath the screw here that holds that little lever in place. That lever works the blade actuating ring. That washer is not standard and it's not helpful. It actually makes that lever a little bit stiff in action, which would mean that the shutter would never run correctly at a particular speed. So then I'm at the stage where I'm ready to clean and put back the shutter blades. Now you might notice there's something wrong in this picture. Well, the first thing that's wrong is that there are only supposed to be 5 blades, not 6. So for some reason there's an extra blade here, and I don't know why someone would have put a 6th blade into that shutter. And there's something else odd here too. On these shutters, the first blade always has an extra hole, which shows you that that's the first blade. It serves no other useful purpose, it just shows you that that's the first blade when you go to assemble the shutter blades back into the shutter. None of these blades have got a second hole there, so we've got an extra blade and none of them are blade number 1. So that is really weird. I just really don't know what to make of that. I'm carrying on, back later. Well, I'm still working my way through the shutter. I've got it all reassembled now, bar the main lever. But I'm at the stage where I'm cleaning up these last components, ready to put this thing together. Now this component here is just a filler really. It just sits in the front of the ring here, and the lens sits on top of it like that. So it's just a painted ring just to fill up that space. It serves no other purpose. But it's in quite a dirty shape, which I put down to the corrosion. The surface is quite rough and lumpy. I don't know what to make of it. And here, of course, is the front retainer of the shutter. And as you can see, it's very stained. And I took these to be rust stains, but they're not rust stains. It's actually something solid. There's something congealed on that surface. I don't know what to make of it. Given the colour of it, it could be lacquer. If somebody had put acetone or lacquer thinner or something like that on here, it could be lacquer that's come off the back of this ring and melted onto this surface, or liquefied and run onto this surface. I just don't know. Or it could be that somebody had whatever liquid had got tipped in here which caused all that corrosion. Perhaps that was the colour of it. Perhaps it was orange juice. I don't know. What else is orange? Doesn't bear thinking about it, does it? So I've got to see if I can clean this muck off, and I'm interested in finding out what solvent will actually shift that, because it's obviously not corrosion at all. So I'll try acetone, I'll try a few other things. But the shutter is really coming together quite well. Obviously I had to remove the main, the retard gear train from the mechanism plate to really give the mechanism plate a good clean, and same with the retard gear train. And that means that the timing here is lost, so I'll have to go through the tedious business of adjusting that to get my shutter times correct. Onwards and upwards. Well, it's been a long day. but we have a result. The camera is working nicely, focus nice and smooth, opens and closes, shutter works correctly at all speeds, and generally it's a nice example of a Retina Ia fitted with a Kodak Ektar f3.5 50mm lens. So I was hoping for a quiet day with the minimum amount of stress. This didn't deliver a minimum amount of stress, but it's done and I'm pleased to see the back of it. Thanks for watching.